Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to have everyone here. I just put a couple of notes in the chat, so take a look at those. I'll continue to let people in if they kind of, continue to want to join the call, but we are glad to have you all here. And I'm glad to introduce Lisa Fishman, who is the director of the Davis Museum. Many of you are very familiar. And we are so grateful to have Millie here to talk with Lisa, to really give some insights and share some stories about her experience with the world of fine art in galleries over the past several decades. So I will let Lisa go ahead and lead the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Destiny. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Thank you especially to Millie Glimcher, who's class of 1961 at Wellesley College. Millie is a curator, a scholar, a patron of the arts, a philanthropist, an absolutely wonderful human being on top of all that. Millie was on the search committee that hired me at Wellesley, which means that we met more than 11 years ago. One of the first people I met, in fact, before I came, and one of the reasons I did come. So it's somehow, I don't know, a milestone moment to be able to interview Millie about her career and her life from Wellesley forward. So thank you, Millie, for being with us today. I thought we would start with a question, a general question. Can you tell us the story of your career journey and how you navigated various stages to get to where you are today?
Yes, that was the question that I thought would be the easiest to answer. And then I started thinking about it, and it was the one that I've been thinking about just before we started. And it's interesting that at first I did this against my will. I thought it wasn't really going to be that interesting. But it's been interesting for me to try and answer that question. That was maybe what I thought would be the easiest, and it turned out to be the hardest. And the reason is that I really started thinking about my career. Arnie and I, most of you know, Arnie and I opened the gallery in 1960, when we were both still at college. He was at Mass College of Art. I was, of course, at Wellesley. We opened it in April of my junior year. The story of why and how is too long to even talk about it. But let's say we opened it on a shoestring without knowing a thing about opening an art gallery, really. Arnie wanted to be an artist. I had no idea what I wanted to be. And so through various reasons, we opened at 125 Newbury Street in Boston. And we opened showing Boston artists that were pretty well known in Boston. They were Arnie's professors and friends of his professors. And we didn't sell anything for the first month, and we really only had enough money to stay open for 1 month. And now an old friend, but someone that we didn't really know came in and bought the first piece of art for $1,500. It was a sculpture by Mirko, who was at the time directing the Carpenter Center at Harvard. He was an Italian artist who was in America for a short time. And that kept us going. And by then it was summer, and we actually, Arnie decided that we needed to branch out from Boston artists, and we took a trip to Europe. And from there, it really became an art gallery, but before that it wasn't. Let me look at my notes, because so when I graduated, I was pregnant and had our first child, Paul, in November. And so I worked in the gallery from April till November, but also had to study, pass exams, be a student, as did Arnie. And so in November, when Paul was born, I stopped working, and I didn't work again really until 1972, when Mark was born. Mark was 9, and they became latchkey children, I guess. But I only worked part-time anyway, and so in between that time, the gallery moved from Boston to New York. And in Boston, there were 2 or 3 people that ran the gallery. Arnie's mother, Arnie. Sometimes I was there, but not really. I think there may have been one other person. We moved to New York, and I still didn't work in the gallery. By then I had Mark, who was 1. And so moving on, in 1972, when I started to work at the gallery, there were probably 12 or 15 people working there. I understood from the beginning that I could not sell art. I really could not. That's another whole story, but I could not. But I really gravitated to administrative work. I took care of photography, the catalogs, the archives. There was much more opening for administrative work. And I worked in the gallery from 1972 until 1982, doing all these jobs. Lisa asked me what was the most challenging and surprising thing. The most challenging thing was to find my place as the gallery grew, and to be flexible enough to grow with it, and to find my way within a system that I didn't have a specific job. And that was the hardest part, trying to find meaning in whatever seemed to be something that needed to be done. There were many things always that needed to be done. The one thing I knew I didn't want to do was be Arnie's assistant. That was I knew that from the beginning, and it probably is why we're still married. And so it was always had to be something else. And during that time, I realized, as I was thinking about it, I was always the gallery social director. And I guess that's what I am now still. That is what galleries are, very social places. I just gave a party for the 80th birthday of Joel Shapiro in our home. And I do seem to be the social director. That is the unifying principle of it. But I have really done a lot of different things. In 1982, I decided both of my kids had gone to college because I'd had them so young. I was 43, and I decided to go to graduate school. And I went to the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU. And I think that was the best thing I ever did. I was out of the gallery for 7 years. Again, I was still being a social director. And I was doing, from time to time, I was doing catalogs and always helping Arnie, but not in an official capacity. And when I finished at the Institute, I came back really a different person. I came back without having to figure out where to find my place. I was then a scholar. I was a curator. I could be a writer, and so I took on many other different jobs in the gallery at that point. Now, I don't know if you want to ask me other questions, or I should go on.
Well, I have so many questions because I love hearing stories of Pace Gallery, and I love particularly hearing the stories of all the artists you've known and continue to know through your, particular, I think, special social skill.
Yes.
I mean, really, I think you do an amazing job of connecting people and making people feel really welcome. And that's part of what makes PACE special. I think that's you.
Yes, well, that's true. That um, PACE, Arnie has always believed that our gallery is an artist's gallery, that the artists are the most important people in the gallery, always. That is the first thing that a new hire is always told, that the galleries are the artists are the most important. And so, yes, of course, I've known wonderful artists. The first one that comes to mind actually is Lucas Samaras, because he terrified me. He's the first artist. He came to the gallery in 1964, I think. So, and he's still in the gallery. So he's the one who's been there, the artist that's been with us the longest, and is still alive. And and he terrified me because he made you defend any comment that you made. You couldn't just make an offhand comment. But he taught me a lot by making me defend any comment that I made. The second artist who came to the gallery was Robert Irwin, who is also still at the gallery. And Arnie and I both feel that he was the most important teacher that we had. He was a whole course in itself. And that is, Arnie always says, and I agree, that he taught us the most. He influenced the way we see art today. I could talk to you about Robert Irwin endlessly, but I don't want to.
Well, it's interesting, Millie. I think it's rare for people to hear behind the scenes stories of galleries, whereby there's such a symbiotic and intimate relationship between the gallery and the artist, and where the gallerist would say, I've learned so much from these artists, right? Because I think people come to believe that it's somehow very transactional relationship, and I don't think that's true at PACE.
Right. Well, I think certainly with Arnie and with Mark too, but more with Arnie. I will skip ahead to say that really in 2010, I would say, Mark began to take over. And
your son.
Mark, yes, our son, who's been in the gallery since 1985. So I think he's entitled in 2010 to take over, although it wasn't easy, but he really has made the gallery his own. But I will maybe leave that for later.
Well, I have a question actually, to take a step back,
yes.
to ask how Wellesley education prepared you for this life and this career.
So I had planned to major in French because I couldn't think of anything else when I entered Wellesley. And Arnie, I knew Arnie from the time I was in high school. We were friends. We were not boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. But he influenced me to take major in history of art, which was certainly the most important thing I did at Wellesley, was major in history of art. I just loved the art department. The art department was fantastic. And all the experts team taught. I guess other places do it, but I don't think that many places in Art 101 were the major teachers teaching history of art. And so the knowledge that I gained as an undergraduate was extraordinary, really extraordinary. And when I went to graduate school, to the Institute, it was 20 years later. And I still think that the Wellesley education prepared me in the most wonderful way for that. And of course, it prepared me guess maybe it helped me be the social director, and to really be able to talk to artists and to understand artists and to respect artists. And so I think it was, well, it was the basis of everything for my life. That and Arnie, Wellesley and Arnie. Those were the two things that carried me.
Excellent, really excellent.
You had asked me about mentorship.
Yeah, I wondered.
And really, my only mentor was Arnie, who was making it up as he went along. So because we really didn't have mentors. Who started an art gallery the way we did? And we had to figure it out as we went along. And I think today we have galleries all over the world. We have over 200 employees, and we stopped. But that's because of Arnie. Arnie, if Arnie was still running the gallery, that would not be true. And but I've had to be really flexible. I think that was the thing that surprised me when I started thinking about my career. Was I don't think of myself as a flexible person, but I had to be very flexible to adapt to the gallery as it changed from year to year. People, additional artists, additional dealers, additional backup people, art handlers. We had 2 art handlers in New York when we started. I don't even know how many we have now. 20, 25, I don't know. Not counting in other countries, just here in New York, because we have 2 warehouses, and I think they change paintings here every day, I swear. And I get, because they get sold, and so they take it down and they put up another one. It's extraordinary. The galleries,
with the expansion of the gallery, you've also had to be flexible and open and curious of mind to travel all over the world.
Oh yes, well, that's a big bonus for the gallery from being in an art gallery, is the travel. Arnie's so upset in the pandemic not to be able to travel. I was happy to have a little bit of a rest.
Yeah.
But
what other impacts has the pandemic had on the galleries and art world?
So we opened this, I suppose most of you know, we opened a standalone gallery, 8 stories. And we have 3 galleries. We have 2 floors of offices. We have a terrace, which counts as a floor, 6th floor, which is a beautiful open terrace. And
what's the address, Millie?
It's 540 West 25th Street. It's between 10th and 11th Avenue, almost at 11th Avenue. And then we have an open floor that Mark decided would be called Pace Live. And he really envisioned that the gallery would be a kind of community center, almost like a museum, only you don't have to pay. And he wanted to have lectures and performances and musical events on the 7th floor. And they set it up so there's all kinds of digital stuff that people can use. And so we opened in September 2019, and in March 2020, the gallery closed. And that was really tough. I mean, we were certainly worried. How would we manage? Some people were furloughed, some people worked from home. But Mark, talk about flexible. Mark is very flexible. And so we, as many other galleries did, we had online, you could buy things online. And we did sell things online, which we didn't sell $10 million paintings online, but we did sell very good things online. People, I guess, really needed to buy art. And so our online, we still sell things online, which we never did before the pandemic. So we opened the gallery sort of in the summer of I guess summer of 2021. And it was really closed until then. And it was so weird. So I would come back here from time to time. We would come into the building. And the first time I came, my desk had been left like I'd be back in a few weeks. And same with, I'm sure all of you had, if you went to somewhere else, it was, you didn't expect to stay more than a month, 2 months, at least we didn't. Wow. And so we did open in the summer of 2021. Thankfully, people worked from home, a few people came in. But we did open this fall quite seriously. We're on our second round of exhibitions. And during the time that we were closed, it was very nerve-wracking to wonder how we could support this huge thing that Mark had opened. And Mark had COVID, and then he got better, and he traveled even before there were vaccinations. He traveled to wherever the clients might have gone to sell art. We opened a gallery in East Hampton because Mark thought we were there, and 2 of the other dealers were there. And then last winter, Mark opened a gallery in Palm Beach, and that kept us going for sure.
Well, that's really smart and interesting, right? I mean, talk
Yes.
about flexible.
Yes, flexible. That was a surprising word to me, but that's
Speaking of surprises, what has surprised you most about the course of your
that's one
career?
of the things. This is the fact that I was flexible. Well, another thing that surprised me, and it's a very important part of my career, is that I decided to go back to graduate school, to the Institute. And it gave me a new confidence in myself that I didn't have before. And when I came back to the gallery, Arnie viewed me in a different way too, and I began to curate some exhibitions. I offered my opinions about exhibitions and artists. I wrote some catalogs. Well, I wrote a book about Dubuffet, which Mark really, he was a great encourager for that book. And I still get compliments today. The book, the reproductions are terrible. We didn't have the ability. It was done very quickly. It's not like today. And we had bad transparencies, and we didn't have the time to get new ones. The book was supposed to come out as part of an exhibition that was done with Wildenstein. That's another whole story. But this was before we actually were partners with Wildenstein. But it was kind of a toe in the water thing. And we had a great big retrospective. And this book was supposed to be the catalog. And so it was all rushed. But I knew Dubuffet so well. Talk about knowing artists. So I didn't mention Louise Nevelson and Jean Dubuffet, who were the most important artists for us because they put us on the map in the 70s, where we were really still not showing important artists. And once Louise Nevelson came to the gallery, and then 2 or 3 years later, Dubuffet came to the gallery. He really, really loved Arnie. He was a very difficult artist, but Arnie just hit it off so well. And we used to visit him very often in Paris because by then my kids were grown. I didn't have to worry about them. And we would go very often, and I got to know him really well. So I could write about him in a way that I couldn't really write about anybody else. I had not gone to graduate school yet. In fact, that was the reason. I forgot about that. That was the reason. Finishing that book made me want to really go to graduate school. And but I get compliments all the time on the book, people, because there aren't very few books on Duquesne English. And so people tell me, people who come in here who are gallery assistants to start work, they will tell me that my book will really help them in school.
That's excellent.
Which is great, which is really great. And okay, so let's move on. I mean,
well, I think that's a beautiful segue actually into the question, which is, what brings you the most joy about?
Well, yes, so I would say, surprisingly, what brings me the most joy is the fact that I went to graduate school and I can see myself as a scholar now and a writer and a curator. I haven't, the show that I was most proud of brought me the greatest joy. It was a show called Happenings. It was a show that I wanted to do from the early 80s, but I wasn't able to do it. I didn't know how to do it. And so I did find it. I finally pulled it off in 2012. And it took me 5 years to put the show together. And it was a terrific show, if I must say so myself.
It was outstanding. It was gorgeous. And
the thing about it was that people had written about Happenings. A lot of important scholars had written about Happenings, and they had turned Happenings into whatever point they were trying to make. And there was no basic book about Happenings. We represented most of the artists still. The only one we didn't represent was Alan the Pace represented Oldenburg. Well, Lucas Samaras was in the Happenings. Jim Dine, Robert Whitman. These were the original people, and Alan Caprow. They were the original people that made the very first Happenings, which were the beginning of performance art. That's what they were. And Alan Caprow had died, but in 1987, I had gone to San Diego to interview him because I couldn't give up on the idea of the Happenings show. And so I had that interview. And so I knew how, at that point, I at least knew how to ask. When I listened to that interview with Caprow, it's so embarrassing because I didn't really know how to ask questions well. And by the time I was talking to Dine and Whitman and Oldenburg and Carolee Schneemann and oh my God, I can't remember the other woman that I had. She was Whitman's wife at the time. Anyway, I knew how to ask questions so much better. And that was what brought me the greatest joy. But I think that also, as you said, having the chance to know such wonderful artists, that is what brings also the greatest joy. And preparing that show, I got to talk to Oldenburg and Dine, and who I'd known for 40 years, and had never really talked to them in the depth of the way I talked to them. And that was a great joy too. Yes, I would say.
It sounds to me like your projects have interwoven the scholarly with the personal touch and experience that you have from the gallery. And that has really made your work distinctive. It's very unusual, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that every student who's here and every student who will watch the recording of this wants to know, what kind of advice do you have for current students and recent graduates?
I know. I thought about that. Well, probably one bit of advice might be to marry an up-and-coming art dealer. It certainly helped that I was married to the owner, but and that's just said in jest. Well, one of the things I would say is go to graduate school, I think. I mean, that helped me so much. Now, because I can't sell art. I really cannot sell art. And I think it's because I don't feel the need to buy art. I think that's a lot of it. I love art, but I bought the first work of art I ever bought about a month ago. And so,
And what was that?
what was that? So we had a show of Robert Longo.
Mhm.
I don't know if you all know what Robert Longo's work is, but he copies meticulously mostly he has done photographs in the past.
Mhm.
And 3 years ago, he started to do copies in black and white. Where he uses charcoal, pencil, and the white of the paper. Abstract expressionist works. He made a copy, I don't know which Pollock, a de Kooning, or maybe more than one, a Motherwell. And there was an exhibition in East Hampton of all of these works, black and white. And I practically cried seeing them. I just thought it was amazing. And we had a show of he copied photographs, but sometimes put together various photographs. This was related to the pandemic. He did it all during the pandemic. So we had one huge, they were all huge, of bats flying in the air. This is the most important one, of the pedestal of the Robert E. Lee monument, where it was covered with graffiti.
Right.
So the show opened 2 days before they took away that statue from where it was.
In Richmond.
So one of the things he had done was to make an exact copy out of pencil and not charcoal, but just pencil, of Durer's Etching of Melancholia. It was like this big. And I always thought, oh, I would love to have that etching. So I bought it. It wasn't an etching, but and in a way, it's even more wonderful that he made it today. Melancholia was a great part of the pandemic. And so that's the first thing I bought. I'm 82 years old, and that's the first.
That's perfect. That's perfect, Millie.
So now, how did I come to this? Oh, what did you
Well,
ask?
you were saying that you don't sell art.
So
but
I cannot.
You do work with a lot of young people who come into PACE, into the various galleries, and who are coming up. So you've seen a lot of, entry level.
We do have we have 3 of our dealers started answering the phones. But I think if you go to graduate school, it helps you. We did have 2 women who came from Wellesley. I can't remember their names now, who aren't here now, but they got as far as assistance to dealers. I mean, very important assistance to dealers, and they kind of help dealers sell art. They really a dealer assistant is one of the most important people here in the gallery. Most of the dealers now have 2 here in New York. I don't know what they do other places. So yes, I do see them here in New York, at 540 in this building. I have less to do with them than I did, say, at 57th Street, which was so much smaller, so much more intimate. This is it's beautiful. It's so beautiful and so nice to work here. You have very high ceilings, and it's hard to walk from floor to floor because you're walking double height. And but I don't get to see the gallery assistants very much. or talk to them very much, because I'm not really involved in the day-to-day anymore. So there really is no reason to be talking. I mean, I talk to them, but not so much.
What project are you working on now?
Well, so I know you asked me this before. Arnie, unlike me, Arnie buys a lot of art. And everyone was very careless about differentiating Arnie's art. Things would come into the gallery and they would be gallery stock. And then Arnie would say, oh, I think I'm going to buy that. And so he would pay for it, but nobody would, and it would say on it that it was Arnie's, but it was still in the gallery database. And nobody paid much attention to our art. And our art was in the racks. Sometimes it would get sold, and which was also okay. But then, so about 5 years ago, I decided we had to have our own database. We needed a warehouse. Now we have 2 warehouses. And I'm just trying to keep track of everything. And I'm not very good at it in terms of managing a computer database. That's what I'm not good at. And so I finally had to get somebody to help me. I've been doing it for 4 years myself, and I'm very slow because I'm still the social director. No matter what, I'm still the social director and giving parties. And we now have a whole event staff, but I do work with them. And they're always coming to me for advice.
I'm sure.
The event staff, yes. And but I'm almost finished with that. And my next project, I have 2 other projects. I thought I was going to, I had a project with Tiffany Bell before the pandemic that we were going to republish Agnes Martin's writings. And I think we should still do that. But I have probably 10 interviews with different people about different subjects. And I think I've never corrected the transcripts. And I think that's what I really need to do before I die. Because
yes, you must.
2 of them are about Dubuffet, not with Dubuffet, but about Dubuffet. And one is with Bob Irwin. One is with Lucas Samaras. I can't even remember. Well, then I have all of the interviews with all the artists for the Happenings book, but I think those are in pretty good condition. But I had to correct them in order to use them. So I think that's what I'm going to do next.
You did a really great history of Friends of Art, which was established in 1960.
I know, and I forgot all about it.
You forgot all about it? It's fantastic.
Yes.
I often share it with people. I wondered how, has Wellesley sustained you in the larger world? You've been a very active member of Friends of Art for a very long time, and you've been a tremendous, generous donor to the Davis Museum. What is it like to carry Wellesley with you for a lifetime?
Oh, wow, that is, I should have thought about that before now, because I didn't. I was thinking about my career. Well, the Davis is the reason. The Davis is definitely the reason that I've carried Wellesley with me. I see it as a responsibility. And I have to say that I did step back the last few years, well, the pandemic anyway, but just before that, I don't know why. I came to the Friends of Art meetings for 20 years, and I kind of felt like I'd had enough of that. And so I stepped back, and Paula Johnson's been working to bring me back, I have to say. She really has. And she's the one that told me about my history of the Friends of Art. I had completely forgotten about it. And I feel like it was unfinished. I kind of hit a dead end, or it became too complicated to
I think, these histories, those kinds of histories are really complicated.
yes. But I learned so much doing that research. And
I think, it's fascinating to me because I felt very lucky to have met most of the women who founded the group. And to see what that kind of peer energy can actually do is just outstanding,
yes,
right?
It's
incredible.
started from nothing too, at a time when women weren't particularly taken serious. This was before me. This was in the 50s, I think they did it. And it was hard for women to get something going, I think. And of course at Wellesley it wouldn't be so hard. But
Right.
They did wonderful things.
They did.
Yeah, and they did wonderful things.
Well, and they continue to. So, Friends of Art has been evolving and changing over time. And I'm really proud.
I think it's so much more professional than when I was there. And one of the reasons I stepped back was that I felt completely outclassed by these really professional women and I felt like I didn't have anything to contribute because they were doing such a great job. They certainly didn't need me. I think that was one of the reasons.
Millie, I'm just going to respectfully disagree. I think we all need you. And we're all really lucky to have you in our orbit, in our sphere.
Thank you.
Could I invite students to ask questions if they wanted to? Anybody? Oh, don't be shy. Matilda?
Hey, everyone. I'm actually a recent alum. I graduated in 2021, so like approaching 4 months ago, which is crazy. Millie, thank you so much for your time. This has been so interesting. I had a quick question about sort of like what the curation process or how the curation process differs in a gallery, whether that's sort of like social curation or thinking about narrative curation in the process of writing a book, because I think at least I got a lot of experience in the art history major, like thinking about curating for museums.
Yes.
But I imagine it's different.
Well, the gallery does, in a way, two kinds of shows. Arnie has always wanted to do museum quality shows, and he made many museum quality shows. And he didn't ever really learn how to curate, but he has curated some of the most amazing shows. So I would say that when you are hanging an exhibition that you're selling, you do have to think of the way they go together to complement each other, which is what you do anyway, even if you are hanging in a museum. But I think you sell well when everything looks great. Arnie's a great installer. He really is a great installer. He has a great eye. I think in our gallery, I think that all shows are hung with the idea of making the paintings look as good as we can. The lighting, one of the most important things in this space was to have flexible lighting, and we have museum quality lighting here, no question. I mean, we hung a show of Thomas Naskowski. I don't know how many people know his work, but he's a great abstract artist. He died recently. Very little known because he only makes little paintings. If he made great huge paintings, he would be much more noticed. But he makes the most wonderful. I have one. Well, never mind. And his show was a tribute show, and they're very hard to hang together because all abstract, and we're all so different, except they're the same because he made them. And Arnie hung the show. Well, they were not supposed to even be sold. His wife wanted to keep them. Those were her favorite paintings. And people were just, we had to sell almost all of them because people were begging. And finally we agreed to sell them if people promised to give them to a museum, which that was her only stipulation. I'm not really answering your question, but I do think, well, when you hang a show where you want to teach people something, I guess it's different than if you're just hanging a show to make the paintings all look great. I guess that there is a difference, of course. There is a difference. Arnie and I made a show of de Kooning, du Buffet, the women. And things were not for sale, but they were, of course, one was hung next to each other, and there was a point to what we were teaching about that. There wasn't, maybe it was one painting for sale, the one du Buffet, but otherwise there was nothing for sale. And it was a terrific show. And it was a teaching show for sure. And Arnie did an exhibition of Bonnard and Rothko. Arnie had known Rothko, and Rothko made a painting called Homage to Matisse. And so everybody thought he was influenced by Matisse's color. And Arnie was in Rothko's studio one day, and he asked him about that. And he said, oh no, you go look at Bonnard's, and you will see where I got my color. And so Arnie decided to do a Bonnard Rothko show. And we were able to get Bonnard's because at that point we were partners with Wildenstein, and they had the Bonnard estate. So Arnie could pretty much choose what he wanted. And all the paintings came into the gallery, and Arnie said to me, either this is going to be great or it's going to be a disaster. And when he got them hung, you could see, well, he'd chosen the Bonnards. He didn't have that much choice with the Rothkos. We represent the Rothko estate, but still, he didn't have that much choice. There were certain Rothkos that we could bring in, but he did have a lot of choice for the Bonnards. And so he ended up bringing in a lot of Bonnards and then using some. And Rothko's sort of purplish brown hues, his oranges, his yellows, they come out of Bonnard. And that show was probably the most attended show we ever had. The last day, people, this is on 57th Street, they were in line outside down to Park Avenue waiting to get in because we had to have a limited amount of people in the gallery. It's a bit like the pandemic now. And because, I mean, these were all museum paintings and privately owned and what have you. But so we do make those two different kinds of shows. And yes, I guess when you hang for an artist that you're selling, you do have to just make sure they all look the best they can look. I guess that's it.
Thank you, Millie. Any other questions? Does anyone else out there have a question?
Well, it's been my pleasure. I could go on and on, but I didn't realize that I could, but now I know that I could.
Thank you. Thank you, Millie. It is always such a pleasure. And I think I could sit and listen to your stories for hours and hours and hours and endlessly, honestly. Maybe I'll close. I know this is a funny question, but am I right in recalling when you did the history of the gallery, the exhibition that was from the archives that showed the history of the gallery, was there a coat that Du Buffet had made for you?
Yes. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but Dubuffet's work, but in the late 60s and 70s, yes, he made this group of works called Orlu, which was a word that he made up. They are red, they're red, white, and blue. I don't have any here. And so for him, the Orlu was, it was a question to himself. Could he create an alternative world, universe, that had stoves and books and kitchen utensils and clothes, and make it a whole world? And that was what he did with Orlu. And so in 73, he presented a performance work, which was called Cuckoo Bazaar. And he had made costumes with huge shoes and big hands. And if you look up Cuckoo, it's C-O-U, and then it's B-A-Z-A-R. There's not a double A, by Jean Dubuffet. And it was performed at the Guggenheim during his retrospective at the Grand Palais when he had a retrospective there. And the last time was in Turin. He at the opening of the Guggenheim, he gave me one of the coats that he had made for the characters. It was very heavy, very padded, and he wanted me to wear it like all closed up like this. It looked so horrible on me. It looked just terrible. And so I got a long black dress with a high collar, and I turned the lapels inside like this. He was a little bit surprised when he saw it on me. And then it looked great. And I wore it to, and I didn't wear it to the Grand Palais because it was too much to bring with us to Paris. I didn't wear it in Turin, but I wore it. The Carnegie opened an exhibition of Dubuffet, and I did wear it there to Pittsburgh, and I wore it one other time recently. Can't remember, but it was in that exhibition. Yes. I can't actually emphasize enough. I haven't thought about it, but Nevelson, Dubuffet, Agnes Martin, and Bob Irwin were really the four artists that influenced our life a lot. And they couldn't be more different. They really couldn't be more different. And that's the thing about Arnie. Leo Castelli had a pop art gallery. I can't remember his name. There was a gallery for poured painting across the street from us in the Fuller building. I can't remember the gallerist's name. And there was a minimalist gallery, but Arnie kind of came on the scene just a little bit too late. And so we had an eclectic gallery, and that was always a criticism of us in the beginning, because we had Samaras and we had Dubuffet and Nevelson, and then we had Light and Space from California, and that they would say, Glimcher doesn't know what he's doing. But he loved it all. I love it all. We learned so much more by knowing so many different artists.
Millie, you are really endlessly inspiring.
Oh,
Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. You helped me too to think about where I've been. It's true. Thank you all.
Thank you,
to
Destiny, for
everyone.
inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, for guiding this conversation.
Yes,
Of
yes,
course.
definitely have to thank her. I would have been all over the place. I think I was.
Not at all.
Great.
And of course, thank you to Millie for your time and your generosity in sharing such great stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.